The trial was over. Jesus, bloodied, bruised, aching and sore, was forced to carry his own heavy cross from the city of Jerusalem to the hill they called Golgotha, which was outside of the city. Jesus stumbled and fell on the way. The cross was too heavy. He was too weak. And so they commandeered a man out of the crowd and they said, "Here, you, take this cross and bring it out to Golgotha." And so this man, whose name was Simon, dragged the cross the rest of the way. They put nails through Jesus' feet. They put nails through his hands as they hung him on the cross. And they crucified 2 other men with him, 2 robbers. The one robber said to him, "Hey, if you're the Son of God, get us down out of here. You can call your angels. They can free us." Jesus could. But the man on the other side, he said, "You be quiet. We deserve what we're getting. We've done something wrong." And he said very softly to Jesus, "Lord, remember me." And Jesus said to that man, "You will be in paradise with me." And then Jesus looked down at his mother, kneeling at the base of his cross, and he felt so sad. And he looked at his disciple John, and he said, "John, take care of my mother." And to Mary he said, "John will be as a son to you." And so he hung there on the cross. And the Bible tells us that from about noon until 3 o'clock, the sky got very, very dark. It was as dark as night. And Jesus called out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And they laughed at him, and they mocked him. And they said, "Listen, if you're the Son of God, why don't you call angels? That other guy's right. Call the angels, they'll take you down." But Jesus did not sin. He ignored them. And at last, with a loud cry, Jesus gave up his spirit, and he was dead. And when that happened, the Bible tells us that the earth shook in a huge earthquake. The curtain in the temple was torn from bottom to top. Rocks split. Tombs were opened. And people who had been dead came out of their graves and they walked in the city. And the soldiers who were on guard around Jesus' cross, they said, "Surely this was the Son of God." After the earthquake and the temple curtain had ripped and all the rocks rolled around and people came out of their graves, Jesus was dead. And a man whose name was Joseph, who came from a town called Arimathea, went to the officials and he said, "May I have Jesus' body? I would like to bury it." And so they took it from the cross and gave it to him. And Joseph wrapped Jesus' body in new white linens and laid him in a tomb that he had prepared for himself, a tomb that had been carved out of the rock. And he rolled a huge rock in front of it to seal it. Then a number of people went to the officials and they said, "You know, the disciples were talking about Jesus, and Jesus said it himself that on 3 days he was going to rise again. Should we post a guard just in case his disciples come and steal his body away and say that he has risen?" "Yes," said the officials, "that's a very good idea. Put a guard around the clock on that tomb until after the 3rd day." And so, soldiers were positioned around this tomb. What a spooky job that must have been. Big, brave men guarding a tomb where a dead body lay. And then, suddenly, on the 3rd day, when the men were nervously pacing back and forth, the earth shook and everything rumbled and the rock rolled away on its own, and the soldiers terrified, ran into the town, and they told the officials what had happened. The officials gave them lots of money, and they said, you keep your mouths shut, and you tell everybody that the disciples took him. But in the meantime, early that morning, 3 women were going on their way because they were going to prepare Jesus' body for burial. And they carried jars of ointments. And as they walked, they said, how are we going to get that rock rolled away from the tomb? That's really too heavy for us. We should have brought some of the men along. And yet, when they got there, the rock was rolled away and the tomb was empty. And suddenly, an angel appeared. And he said to the women, why do you look for the living among the dead? He is risen. Go, tell the disciples, Jesus is risen. And so the women hurried into the city and told the disciples the very exciting news.